Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 565 on Monday, the 12th of February, 2024. Hello, I'm Alan.
Hello, I'm Andrew. And this week we'll be agreeing with one organisation's decisions, for a change. In new car news, we find out how much range £16,000 gets you. And in points of interest, we learn how a stationary maker built a car. But first, we have one smidgeny bit of follow-up. And it is the news that Arrival has, well, what seems like finally, entered administration after they failed to materialize a single version of their XL, or large electric van, which is what they stated they were going to focus on last year when there was yet another restructuring and prioritizing of business, I think, was one of the ways they put it.
That mean getting rid of the tax haven and also scrapping the idea to create some form of jet aircraft?
Yes, I think it was all that. So what's happening now is the joint administrators are trying to find people who will buy the business, the assets, and the ideas, etc.
That's if they haven't already bought one of the other commercial vehicle companies that's gone similarly TU recently, but without all of the emotional baggage that Arrival seems to come with.
There's up to 400 staff which will be affected, of which there are 172 in the UK.
Let's see what happens. What a shame.
Yep.
Again, lots of promise, but then since the original founder sold it, the management seems to have gone a little bit nuts.
I don't think he helped either. They were in trouble before then.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. Anyway. Should we move on to some new news?
Yes.
And, yes, this one makes us chuckle. There's two manufacturers been in trouble because of their Google ads.
Yes.
And their attempts at search engine optimization. First of all is BMW. Back in the middle of last year, the paid advert of BMW appeared on Google, stating zero-emission cars, download your brochure today, etc., etc. The Advertising Standards Authority challenged whether the claimed zero-emission cars accurately represented the environmental impact of the vehicle, says AM Online. And it basically not necessarily. The other part that's not covered in the AM Online story but is covered elsewhere was pointing out that you can't advertise pretty much any car as zero-emission because, of course, it takes emissions to power it ultimately of some form and to build it and to all the other stuff that goes on around vehicular manufacture, maintenance, and the rest of its existence. MG was the other manufacturer dragged into this one in a slightly separate case where they had a Google ad and it showcased the offer. Find a dealer, book a test drive, save £1,000 on your next MG HS plug-in hybrid MG ZS or MG5 EV trophy long range, renewed with a modern design, increased range, and even more technology. Zero emissions. And the Advertising Standards Agency said, no, actually, because not everything there could be described as zero emissions, or indeed anything should be. Yes, it also pointed out quite rightly that while fully electric vehicles provide no emissions when driven, emissions are generated during manufacturing and charging.
That's incorrect, though we can't say that anymore because of tyre particles. Zero tailpipe emissions is what we are technically allowed to say now.
Quoted Alan from AM Online. You see that kind of thing? The absolute nerdery that has to go into a statement like that. That is what's wrong with the world these days.
Yeah, well, we were talking beforehand about...
Sorry, I'm going to do my old person thing. The anti-EV crowd are peeing me off significantly more than the evangelicals at the minute. And to be honest, the evangelicals can really rile me sometimes just for sheer bloody-mindedness.
Yeah, I am very cross at I was saying this to you before we pressed record, our politicians over the last decade or so and mass media that have encouraged a culture war environment and for dragging the motoring element of it into it, because now we have to discuss this almost every week. Or you sit there on social media and some pillock comes up and makes...
So much more polite than I am.
Makes a... Well, I don't want to have to edit myself again. Makes a point, or a point, he says in inverted commas, that they feel is justifiable for them to... and shoots down another argument. What it has also led to, and we... I know I go on about this a lot, but it means that both sides lie sometimes about their reports or when they're trying to make a point.
Speaking of which, the last piece of ASA news is about Transport for London. Transport for London, very, very quick to point out to everyone else whenever they feel that their data is being misrepresented, but it's perfectly okay for them to put out some radio adverts stating things like nitrogen dioxide emissions had reduced by almost a half in London, in the centre of London, since the ULEZ was introduced, and things along those lines. The Advertising Standards Authority ruled that 3 TfL adverts were likely to mislead because the basis of the claims they made were not given or explained. The claims, which were just given, were based not on actual air quality data, but on a computer simulation of what was expected to happen as a result of the ULEZ introduction.
Yes.
Well, it just wasn't explained at all, was it?
They have been wrapped for not making it clear that it wasn't on actual, even when they talked about actual air pollution deaths, they were actually talking about simulated. But they are very happy to jump up and down as TfL and say, oh, they never argued with the science, they only argued with our wording, so we will now put little caveats in our adverts.
What's going to happen is it's going to be like, obviously I listen to other podcasts, and some of them put out on platforms which automatically insert region-specific ads in front of you for a considerable period of time if you're in North America. And one of them goes through and it tells you about how you can pay for ad-free podcasting from one of the big companies. And in the little bit at the end where they talk very, very quickly, it says, podcasts may contain adverts.
Yes.
And it's just like, what? And that's exactly what this story reminded me of.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the Autocar podcast. I don't enjoy the fact that I can basically drive from my place to the highway before I've actually started the podcast because of the number of unskippable pre-roll ads. It's very annoying.
Yes.
We try not to do that to you people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to take us on to...
Now's a good time for Guilt Minute, yes.
Yeah. I will now take us on to Aston Martin, and there are stories circulating that Chairman Lawrence Stroll has begun the search for the replacement of the 77-year-old CEO.
Amadeo Felisa.
Thank you. If you want to hear the murdering of that, you need to become a patron and you can watch me butcher that name and mess up the introduction at least 3 times. But the fact that he is approaching his 78th birthday has meant that perhaps he's suggested to the chairman, I might like to retire again at some point. Please, could you find someone to take this on?
He has already tried once. He's been in the role for a couple of years and really think he was hired to try to perhaps mend some of the things that got broken by his predecessor, Tobias Moores, where all you heard was doom and gloom from Aston Martin.
That and the sound of the door shutting as they ran away.
Squeak bang, as very senior people decided that perhaps they wanted to work somewhere else and
explore other opportunities in a less fractious environment, maybe.
And then some of them, of course, have returned since. So obviously he's been doing exactly that. And maybe now he thinks, right, look, I've done all right here. I'm still doing all right. Could we look at my replacement, please?
Yeah, he's even...
Good on him.
He's righted the ship. It's going even... I mean, to be fair, since he's been there, they've come out with some new models. They've also tied up that deal, which is critical for them with Lucid. I think that's one of the biggest things that's happened.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of these things were happening before he arrived, but it's all happened in a very calm and, like I say, there hasn't been the negative stories coming out of Aston Martin that there was before. It's all happened in this calm, grown-up manner, and they've just got about their business of trying to make Aston Martin stable. I know that's a entire history of their company's aim at some point or another, but we are no longer every quarter going, oh, is it up, is it down, blah, blah. That it's being managed professionally seems to be a given now, I feel.
I see the new V8 Vantage's come out. It just looks like an Aston Martin. I wish there would be a little spice to the styling, but then on the other hand, if it's working, would you move away from it? But
yeah.
Says Alan, experts in all things good taste. Something like that.
Okay, well, do you want to take us to Europe, actually?
Yes, it's actually Hyundai Motor Europe has suffered a ransomware attack. The ransomware in question is called Black Basta, and I've got to pronounce that very carefully, BASTA. And the threat actors, the people who performed it, are claiming to have stolen 3 terabytes of data. The data covers both Hyundai Motor Europe and Kia as well. It's thought to include information, including legal, sales, human resources, accounting, IT, and management. If you have a Hyundai connected to the online services and online systems and Hyundai accounts, now would be a very good time to change your password.
Just good practice.
Yes.
Particularly if you work for Hyundai or Kia.
You may also wish to change your password.
There will be a link to a Bleeping Computer article in the show notes, and I encourage you to read it because there is a timeline of Bleeping Computer getting in touch with Hyundai and how they reacted to said enquiries, which doesn't fill me with the greatest bit of confidence.
There's a lot of detail there which is incredibly relevant to a computing podcast, but less relevant to a motoring podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We'll leave it at that, but if you want to know more, go have a read. There is lots more in that Bleeping Computer article.
Yep. I'm going to take us to Rolls-Royce now, and the Spectre has been recalled in the US because of a faulty ground connection cable that could make the vehicle susceptible to an increased risk of a thermal event, or fire, as we try to call them in simple, plain English.
It could just go smoky.
Yes. Also, that is true. Also, it could actually pose a risk to any technicians working on the vehicle as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, there will be a link in the show notes because there is a lot of detail in this article. And to be fair to the register, they have done a fantastic job of, and which Alan pointed out to me earlier, pointing out how many vehicles this actually covers.
Yeah, it's the fact that, well, yes, but the recall covers this many, but it's actually this many vehicles. And that's because those other vehicles aren't actually on the road yet. They're probably on their way to places, or they might be waiting for essentially to have fancy stuff added. And they do point out the primary risk is to our technicians to make sure this doesn't happen again and to make sure that it's safe for them to work on the cars as and when they need to, rather than necessarily a driving about issue.
Yeah, the fix is that the bolt is removed, cleaned of excess adhesive and reattached. That's it. So it really is a very simple issue that they have discovered, and it covers vehicles made between October and December 2023.
Just in case you happen to have one sitting outside and you haven't realised.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, sticking with recalls, Alan.
Yeah, there's a list out on Autocar last week. It's revealed the most recalled car brands in Europe in 2023. This kind of thing. You won't believe number 7. Sorry.
That's not what they say.
They do not say the last bit, but it's the headline has been written very much in that BuzzFeed style. And it's an Autocar slideshow, so I'll be damned if I can actually tell you any more because it's all frozen up and smashed itself into itself again.
Well, the top 3, I'll run through the top 3. Do click the link in the show notes because you will see all the brands that are involved. But the top 3 is, number 3 is BMW with 21 recalls affecting 20 models. Then you have Peugeot at number 2 with 27 recalls affecting 13 models. And at number 1, which they didn't want, is Mercedes-Benz with 38 recalls affecting 20 models.
Well, but remember, a recall's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like that Spectre one.
Yeah.
It's a very, very small thing, but it's a correcting it for the future and a just in case rather than anything else. And there's 2 very different attitudes to recalls. One is that there are manufacturers out there who won't issue a recall until, frankly, there are legal blades at their throats, metaphorically speaking. And there are others who go, we attached this warning sticker 90 degrees to how the warning sticker is meant to be completely and totally effective for that country. We need to recall 18 vehicles to have that sorted. and that counts as a recall.
Yep.
And there's others where basically nobody's read any of the legislation properly. The fonts are the wrong size in every single vehicle. They don't need to do a recall. No, not a problem with the car.
Yeah, and then there's everything in between.
And the other thing is, in this list, by the way, it says there are so many issues with so many variants and stuff. And you realize, you look at it and you go, well, actually, you've listed 15 different models, but there's only 1 or 2 platforms in there, because if you have an error, there's something in the steering box of a Stellantis vehicle, all of a sudden, the knock-on effects of that. Well,
we've seen it with Daihatsu, haven't we, recently?
You've got the Vauxhall, the Opel, the Peugeot, the Fiat, the Citroen, and the Citroen, the Dodge, and it just goes on and on and on with its one internal component. And it's not.
The economies of scale really scale your problems if it's not right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might not even be very many of any of them.
But there's a second list of the week before we've even made it through Guilt Minute, Alan.
Yes, I know. You'll notice that they didn't get added to list of the week, because the list of the week is far more interesting.
Yes.
It is, however, Guilt Minute. Quick break in the show where we ask for a tad of financial support to keep the lights on, the hosting running. If you feel that Motoring Podcast is worth a small consideration every month, then you can become a patron. Different levels of patron include different levels of commitment from us to you, including being able to watch the show recorded live. We have a small range of merchandise in our spring store, from stickers to mugs and t-shirts. If you have any spare cash, and we completely understand, then you can help us by following for free from a podcast player or on YouTube to receive every show as they're released, and by liking and rating the show in whatever way your podcast supplier lets you. If you've done all that, and some of you do, so thank you very much, then the last thing you can do is to recommend us to your friends or colleagues.
Thank you, everyone that does. Very kind.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, new car news. And I will start with the new Porsche Taycan. This is their electric saloon and sports wagon. Is that how we call them now? Because it's not really an estate.
No, it's not. It's got a number of names. And you know what? I actually went and spec'd one yesterday, and I now cannot remember. There's the Sport Cross and the something else. Anyway, you know what we mean.
Yes. The one that looks... Oh, well, I prefer the sort of estatey one to the saloon.
I wouldn't kick either out of my driveway for snoring.
If someone wants to, bring one to my house, I'm fine with either, obviously. But they've made some improvements to the technology side of things, particularly the efficiency and power output of the batteries and the electric drives. They've swapped some of the motors around and stuff. They've also made them a little bit lighter, or they certainly have the estatey version thing, the Cross.
Mm-hmm.
That's 15 kilograms lighter, I was reading in this Autocar article, linked in the show notes as ever. But for me, the real thing that absolutely blows this away for me is the fact that how quick it can charge if your environmental conditions allow it. I feel I need to make that a pre-recorded and just drop it in our audio from now on.
It's quite tempting.
But in the, I was reading a first drive on Autocar, which isn't linked, but I think it's linked in this article.
It is linked from within the article.
Yeah, and they were saying how it got up to 80% after 5 hours driving, and I think they were below 20% in 14 or 15 minutes. Because they'd found a charger that could manage that, a 320 kilowatt one. Basically, you've got enough time to either go the loo and come back, or maybe just, if the coffee shop's empty, get a coffee and come back, and then your car's at 80% again.
Yeah. Which is how it should be.
Obviously, it's not going to be, in everybody's price bracket. So they've got prices for the 4S starting at 95,900, and then you can go all the way up to the Turbo S at 161,400.
Does start with a 2-wheel drive, single rear motor at 86,500 as well for cheapskates. The two not an estate variants are called the Sport Turismo and the Cross Turismo, by the way. The Cross Turismo being the jacked up one. That's all right. It was annoying me.
Right.
It was annoying me.
There are, obviously for the Turbo S, it's a ridiculously stupid 0 to 62 at 2.4 seconds. Which is 0.4 of a second quicker than the previous. And then the single motor Taycan will get to 0 to 62 in 4.8 seconds. A pedestrian 4.8 seconds.
I drove the previous Turbo S and it didn't feel particularly slow to me.
No, I'm trying to find, I know I've skipped over it, but what the range is meant to be.
Oh, it's 300 and lots. It's about, it's 300 and quite a bit.
422 miles.
Oh, there we go then. That's for the longest range, but I think that the obviously that's going to be the rear engine one with the optional extra big battery, but it sits in the 400s, in the 300s.
Yeah.
It's more than enough for sensible folk if you can zap it occasionally on a long journey or get most of your weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Most of your weeks driving done for most of us between charges.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's skip to the other end of the automotive range with the Ford Puma. Puma is it's had a mid-life refresh or I'm not going to call it a facelift because it's still not got a great face. It ain't the prettiest. But it's now gone hybrid only. Woohoo. The only engine you can get now is a 1 litre, and it's at least a 48 volt mild hybrid. What that means is that the 1.5 litre, almost 200 brake horsepower Puma ST, which everyone absolutely raved about, is now gone. The ST still exists, but it does only have the 1 litre instead, and it doesn't have a manual either. It only comes with a 7-speed dual clutch box.
Yeah, I saw lots of people moaning about that, and I thought,
well, they should have bought the ruddy thing, shouldn't they?
Well, the other thing for me is how many people actually drive with a manual or want to for day-to-day driving. And again, it's this, as you say, go out and buy it, but it's this whole, this is what a car should have against what most people are having to or doing with their cars, because most people are just trying to get from A to B. They're not out for a drive, because who wants to go on our roads out for a drive at the moment? They're so horrific, let alone the other people on them.
He's on form today, everyone.
It's just, why would you do that? So I'm like, please stop that. It's very tedious. It's not as tedious as what you were mentioning earlier, but it's very tedious.
I've started just blocking it. But I know that certainly for the driving I do over here and the road conditions I do over here, the manual Scion was significantly more miserable to drive than the automatic Lexus. Mostly due to the gearbox, by the way. Not all the other stuff too. But yeah, I mean, the ST, this power shift, it still does 0 to 60 in 7.4 seconds, which is still really pretty quick. I mean, it's a second slower than the old one.
That's quicker than most people can probably cope with.
Yeah, 168 brake horsepower is still not exactly a slug. So I think a lot of it is on paper mooning.
It's people thinking what something should be right against reality. There's a load of updates to the tech as well. They, as we mentioned recently on another vehicle that Ford were updating, they've got the Sync 4 infotainment. They could wheel out the twice the computing power quote that they have done before. There is also a larger touchscreen in the middle of the dash, which has, I know I'm not sure what the soft buttons, which I am looking at that to mean areas of a touchscreen that have been marked for you to stab at. And they've removed physical buttons for a cleaner design. Again, I'm quoting from Ford, who have been quoted in Autocar, totally missing the point of why buttons are good, etc. There's higher definition graphics for the gauge clusters behind the steering wheel, which is a squircle. And then there's going to be an electric version unveiled later this year.
There's also an enhanced suite of driver assist functions, which includes intersection assist, no idea, reverse brake assist, I do know what that is, and predictive speed assist, which I don't like the sound of. It automatically slows down when approaching a bend or junction. You can also get anti-glare matrix headlights. They're good. Some manufacturers should think about fitting those, as well as predictive bending dynamic lights, which sounds slightly dodgy. It uses GPS data to automatically adjust the lighting for curves in the road. I think the theory sounds fine. The practice, I just don't know how well that's going to work. So I'm a skeptic on that one. And also the electric Puma is going to be called the Gen E ahead of its unveiling later this year. I don't know if that's the Puma Gen E or just the Gen E, but it sounds like it's it looks kind of ugly when it's written down. And then, of course, it sounds just like a lady's name, which can also cause issues, I'm sure.
Right, I'm going to take us to the BMW 5 Series Touring, which will be only available as a PHEV or EV, and the PHEV will be petrol. There is no diesel.
Well, hang on. There's no diesel available in the UK.
Sorry.
There will be a 520D and a 540D available elsewhere because we can't have exactly the kind of motor that really would suit a large estate car used for driving long distances. But hey, who knows? Who cares?
Yes, thanks for clarifying that. It's going to be a little bit longer, a little bit wider, and a little bit taller. The wheelbase has been extended as well. Again, fine details. Do click the link in the show notes.
You'll never guess what, by the way. The grille is a little bit bigger.
And a lot uglier. They have also ditched the rear window access hatch that was there previously, but that is because they have apparently worked very hard at the aerodynamics to help increase the efficiency of the I version of this. Because remember, this is the same looking car, whether it's got the PHEV or whether it's got the EV version.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted the top of the range i5, and that's the electric version, M60 xDrive, you need to pony up before you select a single option, £99,040, or whatever that means monthly.
Any of the electric ones, it starts at £69,950, which is not exactly pocket change. I can't see a price for the non-ones.
They haven't had glorious reviews either.
Well, it didn't suit Harry Metcalf.
No, there's been others as well.
Okay,
but yes, it didn't suit him. We'll try not to talk about that, because then I'll remember other videos.
Yeah. Just remember, folks, some of us read the SMMT figures every month.
Yes, and know what they mean. But the PHEV is a combined consumption, whether that's mild hybrid all the way through to the top of the range as far as PHEVs go, between 45.6 and 49.6 miles per gallon under the WLTP rules.
You get well over 50 with the diesel.
Yeah, but you're killing people if you drive a diesel, Alan. You know that. Mm-hmm. There are no nuances or suggestions. Anyway, take us away from what is a little bit underwhelming to something a bit more exciting in estate form.
Well, I looked at it and went, nah, as well, to be honest. It's the Audi RS6 Avant GT, which Car Magazine are describing as an IMSA GTO-themed missile. And indeed, it is a super pumped Audi A6 estate. It has funky stripes in red and grey and black. So I'm not anyone to make fun of a vehicle which has red and black stripes on a white background, am I?
You best not.
It's obviously it's all-wheel drive, twin-turbo V8. It puts out the same 621 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque as any other RS6 performance. Also, as a result, kicks out 0 to 62 in 3.3 seconds, a top speed of 190 miles an hour, which is both a little bit quicker than the standard RS6 performance, although quite how often you're going to find that extra 0.1 of a second to 62 and the extra 16 miles an hour in top speed, I'm not really sure.
But this is all inspired by the Audi 90 Quattro IMSA GTO racer. That's where the colour of the decals are and everything, including the white wheels, which I think suit it in pictures. The pictures look great, don't get me wrong.
They're very much like a Volk TE37. They're not. They are different in the details. There we go. Excuse me, I'm just going to car wheel nerd. In white, they are a bit detailed, but they're that same kind of style. They look fantastic when they're clean. Having put white wheels on a car before, I just don't know how long they'll stay that way.
I love the idea, as we say with any of these really over-the-top special editions, and like with some of the retro stuff that's done, I love that somebody's done it, particularly a large company in this instance, that still does something a little bit out there, although it was quite easy for them to do.
Yeah, but they did it. That's the hard bit, is getting people to agree to do it, not actually doing it.
Yeah, there was going to be 60 allocated to the UK out of 660 examples being made. And they're going to cost, and I do like car magazines, way that they're writing things at the moment, there's just a little bit of a needle sometimes, each costing a pretty potent £176,975. Yeah, we'll never see one unless there's maybe at Bicester Cars and Coffees or something.
It's only marginally rarer than a GRMN. Your chances of seeing one are pretty slim, generally. Next new car news is the Abarth 600E. Now, I like this. Somebody sat whilst we were running through stuff and complained about the quality of the photoshopping on the picture of the... It's either drifting or understeering. Let's choose to believe it's drifting.
Yeah. It's drifting or it's about to have an accident.
And judging where the smoke is coming off the front tyres, I would say it's understeering towards something. But it's a 237 horsepower version of the slightly bigger, familiar looking Fiat hatchback that's coming along soon. The hypnotic purple will be on the Scorponissima launch edition, of which there will be just 1,947 examples produced. It's going to have a big wing. It's going to have large wheels. It's going to have a bespoke front bumper and air dam. And I don't care if it's any good or not. I think it's really, really cool. I think that's great. I actually think the 600E is pretty good looking. I think it's definitely a much more successful take on scaling up a classic shape which has been updated than most of the Mini range, where it's grown, it's got lumpy.
Well, I think it's a better imagination and interpretation than previous 500 expanded range model vehicles were.
Hello, 500L, we're talking to you.
Yes. It looks completely inoffensive, but you know that it's from the 500 type range or the Fiat range, looking at the front end of it, because of the way the lights are done. And that's fine. That's cool. It's another smallish SUV. How excited one can be about that, your mileage may vary. But I have been hearing good...
The important bit is they're trying.
Yeah, whatever. But I have been hearing good things about the latest Stellantis battery technology and their powertrains. They seem to be much, much closer to the WLTP range, but also how efficient they are as well, which is the one of the more important for me.
Yeah, I'd heard the same. An increase in both efficiency and its abilities to predict its range, so that you don't get the whole, I had 150 miles, now all of a sudden I have 95 miles, what's happened in the last 20 miles?
Yeah.
Type of thing, which to me is more important than a massive battery.
Yeah.
For most of us, most of the time, knowing that if it says this many miles, it's very probably going to be that many miles.
Yes.
Of range is important, because I can always work around that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as I trust it, yeah.
I imagine it's going to sell well. And also in this article, there's discussions about what's next from Fiat, because they talk to the boss and he discusses how Fiat is being seen moving forward. So, which is always interesting to hear.
Maximum limits on vehicle sizes and stuff.
Yeah,
is what they're talking about, and in both directions, which is quite an interesting. It's an interesting way to bookend a range, if you know what I mean. Leave the bigger stuff to other people. So, last but not least, here there's a new quadricycle compact car.
Quadricycle, yeah.
It is a quadricycle from a Spanish e-mobility company called Silence. It's an AMI competitor, I guess. It's called the S04. It has a range of 92 miles, and more importantly, batteries you can remove to charge indoors. Silence normally make electric motorcycles, but it is claiming that this two-seat four-wheeler provides low-cost, zero-emission urban transport, quotes Jonathan Bryce in this article. It starts at £15,995. That is more than twice the price of the AMI, but it does offer double the range.
Double the speed. No, almost double the speed.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost £6,000 cheaper than the cheapest Smart Fortwo EQ thingy right at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's wheel hub motors and stuff, but yeah, top speed of 52 miles an hour, so you will actually be able to get around in cities, and 0 to 30 in 7 seconds. Not the quickest in the world, but I like the idea.
But perfectly adequate.
Yeah, perfectly adequate for in cities, in towns, and even getting between towns, to be perfectly honest.
Mm.
If you take out the batteries, they can be fully charged 2 to 3 hours from a 240-volt outlet, which is pretty cool. There is another vehicle already on sale in the UK which does offer similar, and it's the Estrema Bureau, which is about £11,000. It looks pretty cool too. I went off and ended up down a rabbit hole whenever I was reading the story yesterday, and ended up poking into those. This silence, by the way, doesn't look embarrassing.
No.
At all. You know what it reminds me of? I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if it had an Opel or a Vauxhall badge on the front of it. If you look at the light signature on the photo, that's kind of like a third of the way down.
Yeah.
But it does look an awful lot like some kind of Vauxhall Opel concept car. I don't think you'd be ashamed to be seen in it. Neither does it look like a crib of a Smart Fortwo either.
No. Which
is the other. And thank goodness it looks nothing like the vehicle, which I've forgotten the name of, the Riva thingy. Oh, what was it called? You know, the little pug ugly thing that you used to see around London, which was terrible.
This could be a step to urban mobility that is down from a big car, particularly if they can do it, say, higher vehicles and stuff initially. I would imagine that's what they would hope to get in with. But as if you lived in London or any of the big urban areas in the UK, to just potter around.
Even if you didn't, it's a perfect driving to the station car. So if you lived in rural Berkshire or somewhere like that and you need to get the train in from Reading every day to try and pick a not so hypothetical, I guess, idea, then this would be that kind of thing. Why could it not take it to the station, park it at the station? You've got 92 miles. Yeah. It's going to do you most of your week on one charge, and then whenever it is down, you take battery inside at the weekend, plug it in, and you're done. So even if you don't have off-street parking, lots to be said for it.
Yep, it's an interesting idea. I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I will take us on to Designer's Mood Board and the shock news that T. John Mayer, who has been at Volvo Cars for the last decade, has now left. He was the exterior design director. He was responsible for Volvo Design and Concept Center in California, but he's moved on. Unfortunately, we have no more details as to why or where he's going. So he's obviously somewhere, and he's been made an offer he can't refuse, etc. I know I'm stating the bleeding obvious, but the way that it's happened so suddenly,
I would imagine so. And he's been asked to go, well, it's a good time of the year to go look at the garden. Just go look after the garden for a little while.
Yeah. We'll be keeping an eye on that, and when it is announced where he ends up, we will obviously bring that to you.
Either that or he's packing up his house so that he can put it into a container and ship it to China.
Yes, could be.
Mm-hmm.
Points of interest. We're starting the points of interest now.
Yes. And it's a particularly strong selection this week. Been looking forward to these. Lunchtime read reckons to be 6 minutes. It's from Mike Bonowski. He's a man who experiments with newsletters.
Yes.
And they can vary in what's in them. But if you subscribe once, you keep getting whatever the latest evolution is. And they are...
His current iteration is incredible.
Its current iteration is a hark back to the first iteration, which is where I first heard of him. And pretty much every day you're getting at least one interesting car.
And it's a perspective you've probably not thought of as well.
Yes, and it is. It's not just a description of it, but it's sort of all the background stuff, which moves on from the original Bonowski's car of the day, which is how I knew of him originally. It's that, and then there's a commentary on news stories too. But what we're talking about today really is one from last week, and he's talking about the Will VI canvas top. Now, most of you will know that the Will VI is, of course, basically a Toyota Yaris with a different top on it, and that's cool. But what he actually goes into, of course, it's only cool to me. But what he actually goes into is he goes in. I've just got to get the jokes in before anybody else does, really. It goes in and it talks about the whole Will brand and the background and the idea and what it actually was, because I think that that's overlooked an awful lot. The whole thing is very, very interesting. Do go have a read. Take 10 minutes to have a read and to flick through some of the pictures, not just of the cars and the colors, but also some of the other things you could buy from the Will brand.
The sweet brown beer.
Yes, yeah, all sorts of stuff. Toasters, you could decorate your whole house. It's very cool.
Yep.
Very cool.
Really, I love coming across stuff like this because it just, the things you don't know, it's brilliant. Love it.
I mean, some of us need to get out more. Maybe you already knew much of it, but yeah, that's very much more a reflection on me than anyone else.
Okay, I'm going to take us to the list of the week, and this is from Goodwood Road and Racing, and it is titled The 9 Weirdest Cars at Retromobile 2024. Retromobile is...
It's a great big classic car show in Paris.
Yes.
And it's one of the sort of top classic car shows in the world. And manufacturers exhibit and they take along very, very cool stuff. Lots of good things. It's one of those ones I would like to get to. There's a former colleague who every year says to me, that's another year and we still haven't made it to Retromobile. I always manage to just miss it for some reason. I think it's just when it falls.
Okay, this is actually quite a tough set to pick any from, I would suggest, this week.
Yes.
Is there any that, you can't say more retro than the others because they all are, but is there any that really stand out to you?
Yes.
As being the, what was the title again? The weirdest.
The Jules Dakar 84 six-wheeler.
Yes, that caught my eye as well.
Yes.
I love the design.
Yeah, the description here is it says it's like an F117 made babies with a Mercedes 6x6, which I think describes it pretty well. It's a 6-wheel drive pickup truck. It's a complete and total bitzer. Some of the engines from a Fiat, the gearbox from a Porsche. The radiator is from a company called Chausson, which I do know of, and I can't think what for. Windscreens from a Citroen CX. It looks really futuristic, like it's dropped out of a Jerry
Anderson,
thank you. TV show with Super Marionation. Supposedly it was a bit of a disaster on the Peking to Paris rally that it was originally designed for. It did compete in the Dakar in 1984, but it was not a reliable beast, sadly. But it's so cool and so silly, and yeah, I like it.
Good choice. Do click the link in the show notes because there are several weird and wonderfuls. Well, they're all weird and wonderful, and you will enjoy running through this because I hadn't heard of most of these, which will surprise nobody. The manufacturers, let alone the actual thing themselves.
Really? Okay. There's at least one of them I've seen in person. So.
Okay, good. Alan, do you want to take us to the unfinding in our dystopian hell that's coming?
Yes, last but not least, via the Autopian and Jason Torchinsky, get well soon. His list, it's titled, These are the most nightmarish car features subscriptions I could think of. Now, I want to point out that these are currently, at the time of recording, fictional.
Yes, from his fever dream.
Yes, but they might not necessarily remain there because, like...
They will use this they will use this list as that's a good idea.
So there's a list of 18 there, including stuff like suggesting $8 a month for a real-time speedometer. Otherwise, it works on a 10-minute delay. The windows roll down for free, but it's 25 cents each time you want to put them back up again. These kind of things. The thing that worries me most about this was the number of people who in the comments have suggested capture refill windscreen wash, which that just doesn't seem as far away as I would like it to be. Have a read because it is a good chuckle.
But it's also a warning.
It's a chuckle and it's a warning. And also there's some bits where you read it and you think, oh yeah, I can see that.
Mm.
subscriptions for cylinder activation, the default settings of eTwin, but you can activate more cylinders for a certain amount more per month, up to a full V8. I mean, that's the sort of complete follow-on from the whole, we've fitted all the seat heaters, but you're not getting to use them, BMW.
Yeah, the only way to stop it is if we all constantly say no and no one buys any.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen.
No, it won't.
That won't happen. Yes, that's about us.
It is.
For this week. Don't think there are any parish notes that are relevant today. No. With all of that, I suppose it's time for me to remind you not to forget that between now and next week, you can give us any feedback, share your thoughts to the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Remember, you can support us financially via Patreon, and please leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. Andrew, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is via Twitter or Mastodon. If you search for Crack Windscreen, you should find me there. And Alan, if people would like to know even more about what you know about the ULEZ, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you personally?
Best ways are either Twitter or a Blue Sky, where I'm at AJP Bradley. That's BRADLEY. We will be back very soon, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley.
I've been Andrew Clues.
And safe motoring.